But
which
this
should be
is nice also. I kind of like this a chat with you as a mirror expression in some way, but because I'm also seeing from the dialogue. Again, Marty called today, and now Marty's
Mhm.
range of experiences, where he's also telling me, look, I do see it now from the spiritual perspective, not only the survival perspective of the cancers and this and that and falling away and the moment of aloneness that you'll have. And I say, look, we used to kid around and we say, look, a doctor can't sexually attack you if you're unconscious and he's doing CPR on you. So I say,
Hopefully not.
okay. No, they say, but they say, why is that wrong? And I say, it's not that it's a question of it's wrong, it's a violation of the oath of do no harm. And meaning what? That a person who's making love with you has to be conscious and saying, okay, baby, to it. Okay. So it's not, so there's a difference between your horniness that is logical in the world, but there's a difference between that and lovemaking. Lovemaking means an I and thou element happen, where it's soulful and then it's physical. Not that it's physical and then it's soulful, because from the physical, it's almost impossible to get to the soulful unless you break up and you remember the person, and then you start to see the soul of the relationship was hidden in the normalcy of the relationship. So let's say it looks like loss to the psyche, but you see that something has to happen before it can be fully perceived. In other words, that's what they discovered in the creative act and making a film or making a play, that somehow for you to be able to explore your experiences, you had to be free from them in some way, where you saw it was a creative experience.
Yeah.
But the actors would not see what happened to them as a creative experience. But the director, then seeing a larger picture, was seeing that the mistake in the real world was in fact an opening of something else.
Yeah.
And you see at one point that some of the relationships that were had, even though they may have ended, they didn't really end. They just became logical because a feeling fell away. And once they were logical, it didn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
But you also see, while it was shared, people may, in the meeting and in the creation of their relationship, they may have saved each other's life in some creative way. And by interrupting a kind of karma that was in their story. So let's say some accident happened where they had to reflect on their life somewhat, and on reflecting on it, they changed it somewhat, the relationship to it. And so you see that the atmosphere, even in the house, just goofing, and I was really goofing in the last few days since Spiro's been here, with Segway has become like a hip mother jumper who knows a lot of shit, and then where's our old other Segway who was kind of nuts? Okay, and still. So then we're in the story, but he's also, and so you kind of see him showing off to Spiro, and Spiro kind of goofing back with him or whatever. Okay, and so then you see that I've been trying to hide perceptions and jokes. If you see, so, but then he's become brilliant in jokes himself now.
Yeah.
The way of, or his remembered old jokes. So then it's funny to me to see these movies, to revisit each of the movies, and to see each relationship had that, to me, was still based on the energy that ran through it, but the stories were so different. And yet they coexisted within where they would be impossible. They ate at the same table, they hung in the same room, they shared this, the other's tears and the hurts, and yet you would say these are the wrong guys to meet each other. Okay. But they are also seemingly the perfectly right characters to meet each other. In terms of a retro, when you see the movie of your life, not as a detachment, but even as a deeper then the attachment to life, you see that the relationship to the creative aspect of your life is even deeper than your attempt to survive no matter what. It's the energy that survives, not the body is in relationship to the energy. And somehow, as you meet the energy in different forms, even we'll say yogically, but you met it in an environment where yoga was a natural expression of the day, it wasn't the dominating. So then you saw yoga was this immersive, that there was an immersive element in something that then became your lifestyle. So then somehow, just by doing this faithfully, you see that your day changed. And you were bringing this somehow ritual into your natural life, where the ritual was still going on. And so even if you had a job, you brought that ritual. So you were a yoga teacher who had a job. And then you see on the job, you were teaching people yoga postures and things like that. So you see the energy runs through the story.
Yeah.
And that even though you enter into what is called a normalcy, where you're trying to survive with a job or trying to survive with a situation, there's something a little bit different, where it's not exactly work. It's more that your work is about something else, that it's a kind of a awakening inherently in the story, even in jokes, even in just hanging out, or even having a meal or whatever. That there, so then you start to find out the premise of what a spiritual being supposedly was in the past, was that they saw something so deeply that their life was then charged with that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter if they were sons, daughters, fathers, uncles, they were this first.
Mm-hmm.
They were the energy first, and then these were their expressions, supposedly. Now, the premises of study is that this is a process that is happening towards that experience.
Right.
But usually that you then find that the person has made a breakthrough, like a Mother Teresa, a breakthrough, and that there is a personal love affair with Jesus.
Mm.
But it's not personal in the normal personal, but there is a hey baby relationship with Jesus that doesn't minimize it, but in fact you understand a hey baby in relationship to the baby. There is a trust and an honesty when you have a baby that you're caring for. That was also a kind of sentiment that when you spoke to the energy, when you spoke to God, or that you had that feeling that you had when you shared a life with a baby. It was an inherent trust that wasn't laid out, but it was inherent. They wouldn't sleep without that feeling. They couldn't do, and you understood that. And yet it's not laid out what that is. But that is a feeling that you're in when there is a dialogue with the energy in your life. And it's felt normally when there's a love affair. Or the love affair also not only meaning a literal love affair, but the natural love affair that the baby can just fall asleep against your body. Where the love affair isn't spelled out, whatever, it is spelled out if it's lost.
Yes.
Because the capacity, then you would see how strongly understanding the child is who not to fall asleep with and who to fall asleep with. You see, there's a kind of trust inherent in the form. And that's what I have attempted to awaken with one's relationship to their health and their body, where they then reincarnate themselves in some way by that affection for the body is not narcissism. It is a kind of affection you would have for the child. The feeling then allows you to see if something's okay or something's not okay, where other people may look, not even see it, but you may see something imbalanced happening. Okay, I'll see you later. Say goodbye to Spiro for me. Okay, Mary's going to drive Spiro to the bus. He's going up to Taos.
Oh, he's leaving now?
He's going up to Taos, and he's leaving that place that he rented in Taos there.
Oh, okay.
And then he'll probably maybe come for a day or two on his way to San Francisco.
Mm.
And Mary will also be going to New York, and Rafi's coming down here on Monday, I think.
Ah,
and then who's coming and going. And I think that Mary just did some Bitcoin transaction with Spiro.
oh, did she? Cool.
Well, because we know that Spiro is a patsy. He's not going to make a buck. He's not going to scam.
Right.
But he knows all the scammers. Just like when you're visiting show business, you can see all the scammers and all the hustlers, and then you're visiting the ashrams and you see all the scammers and all the churches
Yes.
and this and that. So then you see that anytime you enter into a field, you then have guys that are because most of the public that visits don't know what's going on.
Mm,
You know.
yeah.
So let's say you wanted to scam, and you say, "Well, Shakti party is when you're generous." And so let's say, even though it's all so, it has to come from a true space in some way of shared life.
Yeah.
So now, when your business is a kind of sharing or a heartfelt expression, and you see that it's not dependent on friendship, on a feeling, but how it creatively, how it interacts with friendship. So there's something happened in the shared experience and in the friendship. So then I say the business is not literally a business, because if you looked at it, you see how naive much of it is. And then if you see, so then Spiro's been looking at the Bitcoin now. He had Bitcoin that he bought years ago for $3 each or something. And I think that he had one only that was worth $3,000 or something now. Sometimes it's worth 4,000, then sometimes it's worth a couple of hundred. And so it goes like that. But then they said that they had 18 machines in town, ATM machines, in the grocery stores and in the dry cleaning stores and this and that. You can go and you can buy Bitcoin. You know
In
about
Santa
that?
Fe?
Yeah.
Oh,
And the guy says he buys $11 a day or something in Bitcoin.
oh,
And then we had the shaman up there in Taos has his own Remy Bitcoin. Are you familiar with that one, Derek?
Mm-mm.
It's a Chinese one. Ripple. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're
But
having
then they
trouble.
say, no, that's like a right wing Bitcoin. You don't want that Bitcoin too much.
yeah.
If they want, I say, because China owns that one.
Oh,
And you
isn't
know,
that the whole point, not to have the government involved?
yeah. So then they say, but then there are different forms. So then you have to find out the form that's hip to you without being illegal in some way. Because there's many that are smuggling drugs and this and that and doing, so it's a whole
Oh, yeah, they're
story. I
using
still
it for
don't get
that.
it. There was something online that they have a show. What was that show called that explains it pretty much? And Spiro is pretty, but if in fact you haven't explored it, does it come easy to you then, Derek?
Yeah, I think I get it for the most part.
So then what were the companies that you were talking about then, that Mary was going to invest in? It was what?
Cardano.
Cardano?
Yeah, he seems like a pretty good dude.
Yeah.
Of Ethereum.
Ethereum?
Ethereum is another one. Solana is another one that's looking pretty good.
Is it worth investing a small amount, like $20 or something, or not?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's
you can
weird.
pay $50 maybe.
Yeah, we're at like
You
an
mean going to the ATM and buying those ones? But those
no.
are more, the ATM ones are not as hip.
You'd probably pay a bigger fee, I would imagine,
Yeah.
for doing that.
But they give you a receipt, and you could also look at the front of the ATM machine and see if it's going up or down.
It plays by the old form.
So it uses the old form like everything else. It shows you if your investment is going up or down. But you could find that out anyway if you have Bitcoin, right? You
Yeah.
can just go into your account and see if it's. So let Mary try it a little bit here, and then we'll see. Maybe we'll sell some artwork and invest in it.
Yeah, I'll do it if you guys are doing it.
So,
Tell
So
me
let-
what to do, Spiro.
because
Ethereum-
Spiro's the one guy who's not going to make a lot of money. All these other guys are making, but Spiro's the one honest guy that's going into it kind of spiritually. So an accident may happen with him.
The Ethereum people
You know.
used to come to my meetings in New York. And so they told me some backstories about how they were making it. And they told me to buy when to buy, even though I didn't have any money then. But yeah, so I know some of those people, which is why.
Look, a few months ago, when they were saying, would you like to open a business? I said, there's this guy who wants to rent this place there, and he's an artist too. I can give you some nice artwork that'll buy us 4 months of rent. And we can then just hang out and bring a lot of this tchotchkes that really is artwork to hang out there. And then Pete, you can do some video from there and just have a hangout for 4 months, and we'll see what comes out of that. You understand? So to me, that has a Bitcoin dimension to it, where you may do your radio show from there. You may do this from there. You may put some art objects out there for sale. Other people can hang out there. Just as a hangout, just as an accident. And also you gave the guy a painting for 4 months to see how it goes. So I say, it's just waiting right there. It just, somebody has to say, hey, let's try this, So it's right there hanging. It's not like it's 10 years away.
I have to go catch my bus.
He's got to go. So he's going to be our Bitcoin guy. We'll try it here.
Hi, Cyril.
Derek. Maybe you'll speak to Derek from time to time.
Yes, we had breakfast once
Okay.
a couple weeks ago.
Take care. I'll see you soon. And Mary's going in, so that's good. So let's see what happens next. But then Segway said he swears off Bitcoin. So I said, look, I don't have, most of what they say about Bitcoin is pretty shitty, if it's these powers that are running this and that. But then, is there a hip Bitcoin? And that is what? And I say, look, you see how you're living, man, for the last 10 years or 20 years. You see also that you've been living with these, within the yogic expression or whatever. So friends lend you a house in Silver Lake, and you have a house there, and you may hang in, and you're in flux, and you come here for a couple of weeks and go up to Taos and do a scene. But you see, this whole medium of your life has been coming out of the friendships and hanging out. And the friendships, some are billionaires, some are broke, some are this, some are married, some are not, some are breaking. So you're in that milieu, but you kind of represent in that milieu a true guy who doesn't sell out. So part of the invitation to you is around that friendship, but then part of the rejection of you is that you see this scene and you see their moves.
Yeah.
Okay. So part of your beauty is that you can't make these moves easily. Okay. And that's why there is a trust of you, because they know that you're one of the few guys in the situation who's kind of pure about it. And yet doesn't tell people that they shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that, but kind of bows out at a certain time. Or so you see that your life is somehow a book that you're writing, or a feature that you're in, where creatively, just by your being, you're living. And sometimes the living is really high, and sometimes you're strung out and broke, and even if it's high, you can be strung out and broke.
Yes.
And you see most of these guys who've made, through celebrity of one form, have a dual life going, which is heavily stressed. So you start to see that at the same time people are making it big in show business, for every one person who's making it big, there's 10,000 who are pretty broke.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So broke is kind of necessary. And then you see that those guys who have a few million still act like they're broke because they're still a million short, or they're $1 billion short or something. So you see that broke runs through the system, and it's not poor, but it's broke. Broke is a different thing creatively, that you can be broke and still have $10 million. And still in the world you're living in, it may be only $10 that you have or something like that. So let's say that the world that we're taking as a literal reality is always in flux.
Yeah.
So now, as I'm looking at these Bitcoin guys, most of them were too mean, it seems, from my perspective. But then it did seem then when we were goofing with Spiro, we felt that he would bring that kind of schmaltz to the thing. So then we said with Mary, do you want to try to get some? And I think the amount that we'll put in, we'll give it to Rafi when he comes here for his birthday. See if they jump into it or get interested, or Seth or whatever. And then who knows, it may be an expression And then we were asking, some guys, do they collect artwork and trading for Bitcoins or this or that? And they say, even stores are taking Bitcoins now.
Hmm.
Not, they're still trying to, but once the counterculture store here, a coffee shop and store said that they usually didn't take credit cards. They just took cash or checks, but now they'll take credit cards and they're hoping to take cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, you've been interested in also, well, like me, you've heard about it, but you haven't done anything about it.
I keep waiting for the right moment, and now I'm feeling like since you're doing it, maybe it's the right moment, so I can talk to Spiro and explore it a little bit.
Yeah, that may be nice. We'll see, and we'll see here what we do. But it'll be what we're doing, I guess. So I think what Mary is going to do is, well, those three companies. Then I think it's going to be $1,000 and three, and three, or something like that. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you
What?
can do it that way.
$1,000 in each company? Oh, 300 in each.
No, just an experiment in the beginning to see, because he's not done it before, how she transfers. Most banks won't transfer the money to Bitcoin.
Oh, so
Yeah,
how do you pay them?
Some
PayPal?
banks won't do Bitcoin transactions.
You can get, say, like a Coinbase is an app that they use
Yeah.
frequently, and if you just connect your account to that, then
Yeah, I'm actually a member of that. I have that.
Okay, so then they say, so Segway then came in. We said, look, Segway is how you survived in your life. By segueing from one form, you may sell on sneakers online, you may do this, you're selling that, you do. So you see that basically your religion is a segue, not only your name, that you've segued into different expressions. That's how you've created a living. And that's basically how actors would do it, or writers would do it, that you may work for someone if you're a writer and do some writing or whatever, but you're writing your own book, novel. So that the life itself was a creative one. And then when you have that perspective, it starts to become sacred in a way, because you see that past, present, and future are not literally from the ego, but are kind of coming out of a creative life. And so then once that is there, you have access to seeing things that are hidden because it's not part of the continuing life. You see, so then you say, well, how, then we locate, as I was just discussing before, you locate what would the feeling be, and you see that you automatically have it with a child who's caring, that you're caring for and trust you. And it's not trust that's written down or taken an oath, but is inherent in the blink of an eye. And so let's say you're living in a parallel world with someone as normal, where your eye contact with each other is sharing a conversation that others in the room may not share.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a whole other language and a look and a feeling and a shared, and especially if there is something of a trust, then somehow an expression to you that's not so available to the crowd of people.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say it becomes granted that you meet someone in the intimacy, and you see in the intimacy there's inherent trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that trust would be naive in the world and in work and situations, but you see that trust is deeply there, that feeling that allows a normalcy of a situation where people share a life, share a moment, share sleeping, the most vulnerable time, share sleeping in each other's, to be seen in a way that they're not wanting to be seen in the world. As normalcy.
Yeah.
But if in fact creatively you were observing it or writing about it, you wouldn't see it as normalcy. You would see a creative thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
When one is introduced to the creative dimensions of their life, there's a kind of holiness or sacredness without it being over the top that enters into the story. And you see that even though logic claims the story, that they did this and they did, you see that there was a feeling that prevailed before the logic entered.
Yeah.
Is that, oh, Kerry, are you there, Kerry? Well, I see a picture of Kerry. Do you see that? Then?
Yeah, he's there.
Okay.
He must be there. Maybe I don't know. Say hi, Carrie, if you're there.
Maybe he's in a moment where he can't speak immediately.
Yeah,
or-
maybe.
Yeah. Are you?
Hey there. Yeah,
There
I'm
he
just trying to clear some rocks out of the way in my driveway. I'm in my car.
So how are you seeing things? Even looking out the car window should be pretty remarkable. It's looking more like a movie wherever you go now.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's say you've had this experience, and how are you and Derek? Okay.
Yeah, it's been good connecting with Derek through this whole experience.
And you feel that way, Derek?
Yeah. It's
So let's say the story has been released from its history. So the attitudes that were organized in the story, you saw the organized attitudes that would develop in the story would allow, it's kind of a death experience to an extent because then the story carries on without the feeling. And the feeling creates confusion because it's forcing you to give up the story. And it's not only psychologically giving up the story, but let's say if you saw something deeply, and that usually is when one perceives death, not only thinks about death or theorizes about death, but actually is an instrument of the happening. Then what they had to some degree was a mirror effect. And having your nose up against the other's nose in that moment, that breath you took, had an experience to some degree. And you see the basis of the love feeling, the hate feeling, the hurt feeling, are all part of this experience that's revealed only when the people are not in the way of it. And you see the mystery running through the story, but you were subject to the history. So your capacity to be with the mystery, not through any trick way of thinking or being or whatever, but instantly to be where you then see something that the family doesn't see, the mystery and the history. And the mystery was hidden in plain sight. It needed intimacy for it to be explored. Okay. And so you see inherently in the philosophy, inherently in the form, there was mystery and history running through it. And when history banged into each other, then competition would come into the story, other structures, because that is the nature of the literal world around us. And that is why you meet beings in their dying that you couldn't meet them in their living. Because their living was a condition of resisting that experience that you would have in memory. And it's somehow it's almost creating a memory. It's so, sometimes it's so whacked out, the relationship in death, that it can only be visited in memory because it couldn't be visited in the existence, in the real life form. And when you do meet, hey, mommy, how you doing, in memory, you've kind of transcended time and space. You then recognize in the memory of someone is an existence. And the existence isn't literalized. It's, you see that the existence that you have in memory when it's touched is of a soulful memory. The thing that couldn't happen while it was literal instantly happens in the perception when it's soulful. Then the person is soulful also that you're looking at. And that you see what was missing in the relationship that you then visit in their loss. Is that in the literal relationship and the struggle, it lost the contact with the soulfulness. And in its loss, it starts then to have an experience where it feels embarrassed because you threw something away. You realize that not that love has been withheld, but that you threw it away in some way. But in retrospect, when the doer doesn't own the story, so doing something about it is not the main issue. Seeing it is. And in seeing it, you see that there was a parallel life all along. And that parallel life had almost mythological dimensions to it because it wasn't bound by time. It would be by memory, by experience, by loss. So while there was a literal character going through time and space, there was also an evocative experience happening simultaneously that is accessed only when you're in a kind of pure state yourself. And pure state meaning what? If in fact you're in a survival state or attitudinal state, then you'll make your history into a problem as proof of why you're doing something schmucky. And it is relatively so. But we're also saying that creatively, having a perceptive sense of one's history, you see you actually come, at the same time you come from a history, you come from a mystery simultaneously. So although the parents had a history, as you visit their life before you or a year before you, or you see the circumstance around you, you see more of a mystery in the story than a history. And so then you have access to a duality happening in the world, where there's a literal you and there's an evocative you simultaneously. And you see the evocative you is in a quest or a journey. And that journey is in relationship to itself in the world, the dimension of itself, a reflection of itself, not the self so much as literally the historical self. But there's a mirror dynamic happening. And it resembles to some extent, I think, Hermann Hesse's, there was that premise of the broken mirror, and there was 1,000 pieces, but when you looked at it, you saw little bits of yourself in it, none of them being you, but all of them constituting a you. But they say when you saw that, you saw a thread running through your story that they try to accomplish by being priests or being nuns or being this or to being pure in relationship. So they try to literalize something. But it happens perceptively that you see that is happening automatically, that the child is having a kind of innocent love affair with the life, with the energy. And it's unembarrassed love affair, and it's unashamed love affair. It doesn't. And so that times of trust that we take is natural with a lover for a moment, where it's normalized. You see that the normalization, taking it for granted at the same time that you're living in a magical field. And for me, it's become almost all of from Segue to Spiro to Mary, they're going to take a ride, and this is coming in. So it's all magical. And then the dogs, okay. And they listen to you also, the dogs. Okay. So I can't imagine that because I always remember dogs running up on me and coming after me. Yeah, okay. So let's say I'm a person now. And yet it looks like a movie set. And if there's any religion, it is holy shit because of the humor of it. And then I'm talking to a fellow named Segway about the nature of energy and fault and mothers and what, the whole sphere of it in joke form. Let me see, we were saying, here would be a tough joke. What the hell was it again? They say, look, you're fat and cranky and a ball buster and all of that, but that's just your family's view of you. Okay. So somehow you found a way of cursing a guy out, but blaming it on his family. But we don't feel that way that much about you. Okay? So people were telling jokes that that would have hurt the feelings, but cracked you up laughing when you heard them. So we were creating a form of a spiritual joke form that took everyday life and everyday circumstance. And you see the love affair that you had and how it broke up. And okay. And if you were saying, "Are you kidding me?" And you could have called out while it was happening.
Mm.
And you see the joke of it. That the joke of it is that you brought humor, not that you undid it. In fact, you deepened it rather than the possession. The humor allowed you to see another dimension of it, where then you may have seen the real purpose of the relationship you had before it broke up. That the breaking up was not from the perspective of what you were in. You were more of a helper. That somehow the person perceived in you someone who would help or be there or care or whatever. So you see, to some extent, some of the relationships almost saved the people's lives because of where they were at or the despair that they were in or that where they were lost. So to some extent, it gave it structure. And so as you get to experience the journey that is happening, whether you experience it or not, but it is still happening in one's life, then you see, the more you see of the journey, the more you see that there's some elements of you that are caring for the journey. And so when you're caring for the journey, that happens to you automatically. Then the worst thing to do would be to invest in Spiro as crypto money, because I say, why? He's too good a nice a guy, too straight a guy. So you really need a scheming dude who knows what the hell he's doing and can talk shit. And so you understand he's the exact wrong guy. And I say, no, pick the exact wrong guy to take this shot with, because I say, why? Because I still don't get what's going on there. Now, it was explained to me, and they say, look, 150 years ago, you wouldn't have gotten what it means to have a $20 bill. You would think, then they would say to you that this bill is worth 10 pounds of potatoes. And you'd say, are you kidding me? And then it's just a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So that somehow you take it as normal because you grew up in it.
Right.
And you see, if you give it to the bank, you can get this much credit and you can do that, and they loan money. And there's not that much money out there. It's actually more online and more in accounts. And okay, so money is abstracted when you have money in the bank and you don't have money in your pocket, but money as paper. So let's say we exist in a system that in other systems in the world, they would think that's pretty weird, where they do more trading or sharing or. So I kind of had my own system of like life experiences, paintings came my way, this came my way, exchanging with it. And so that somehow that was like a Bitcoin in its own reality, because there was a market out there and you can figure out in the market what its value is that you take a loss on it. But since you traded for it and these just the things that are hanging around, it was a coexisting Bitcoin for me. That even though there would be people like who can come in and then translate, or I have traded a painting for a car and things like that. Okay, whether it has to be literal or someone wants to buy the painting and I'll get the car with it. But for me, it's not business as the real world of business.
Yeah.
And it may not matter too much if you took a hit, if the painting was worth more than the car, but the car was functional and saved your life at that. So I'm operating in a different zone where you see that the living that you want is there's a kind of flux. And so then I've also become aware in the last few weeks how many of these guys are then stashing Bitcoin. And you can see who's literal in the Bitcoin, who's hip and this and that, and what the kind of things that they have going. But then for me, as I say, the collections that we have, the circumstance that you have is its own Bitcoin. But at the same time, there is a real thing happening, a phenomenon happening that I didn't clearly understand yet. So we've been kidding around, discussing that. And there was a film we saw last night on it that explains it a little bit more. And I think it's on Netflix. You have to type Bitcoin into.
I think I've watched that, yeah, with Tico.
Yeah, so Tico would probably be really good because he's naturally grew up in that environment. So Bitcoin would be as natural as dollars. You know?
We've talked about it for a while, and again, we just haven't quite done it yet. But yeah, I'd love to have him. He wants a way to bring in some money anyways.
Yeah, so then that's we'll let Spiro be the floating medium in that regard. Okay, what do you think? Or at least introduce you to the field. But Mary says that she can do it on her own also now.
Yeah, once you know what you do. I mean,
Yeah, so
it's easy to buy it. It's just
so you can
knowing.
it's just that if your bank will agree, but they can just transfer funds and do this and that. So
Well, using Coinbase, it's really easy to buy. It's just knowing what to buy, when to buy,
yeah, so
all
that's
that,
so.
how much to buy.
So that's why we asked Mary into it and others into it, so they would pick up on it. So I'm still free from. All I want to do is get the sense of it. I can get them. If there's anything excited about it or whatever, we can say, okay, like we did with that guy renting his place for 4 months with a painting. We can, okay, give him a painting and buy that much in Bitcoin or whatever. And since it's abstract, let's say the painting has 40,000 in it. And they say, but you still have to take it out there and get for it, so you don't know if you can do it.
Yeah.
But online it says that's what its value has been. So I say, okay, let's get 40,000 in Bitcoin for the painting. And they say, well, that's pretty weird. I said, well, it's just like the painting. It can go up or down and this or that. So that I understand, a transaction like that where something, and they say, look, it's just a drawing on a piece of paper. Why should it be worth anything? They say, yeah, but that drawing is worth $15,000 in that world.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you see that, but you don't go into that world and translate the painting into $15,000 so easily. But you can trade it for something. So let's say that you're trying to live freely. And you see that the very wealthy are not living freely either, that they're stuck in their wealth and their trip, and it defines their life. So
Yeah.
you see, it's not an actual literal wealth. It is a kind of flux of money. So and then they say, okay, what would give you that you would be cool now with everything? And I would say for you, 2.5 million stashed somewhere in different elements. So I see that's what some of these guys are doing, the shamans or whatever. They've got gold, they've got this, they've got that, they're investing that, but they're all trying to have a stash somewhere of $2 million, not literally in hand, but somehow available.
Right.
So then I'm saying, okay, what is Bitcoin? And Bitcoin is somehow the availability. That somehow it gives you the creative availability of, that's the thought. But somehow for 50 or 60 years, I've been living in that flux anyway.
Yes.
And that and one has assumed many identities in this circumstance, but you haven't worked in the coal mines, you haven't done that, you haven't literalized the things. Somehow your life has been your work. And so when you perceive your life as your work somewhat creatively, then you see relationships were creative. Like you met someone in the movie you shared with them. And it awakened you creatively to something that was in the art of it. And so I then see, as that dimension is awakened, then you see many people who have that kind of stardom have a real struggle with being regular people. So they're in stress as a constant. And so you see many so-called illnesses are coming out of the juggling act of maintaining fame and having a personal life. And you also see many people who represent the spiritual form of life also then may have a struggle in their personal translating it. And you also find that out in the church now with the big scandal sexually of what was happening And then they say, of course, that must have been happening. How the hell could they,
Right.
if they had to live in a kind of repression of the sexuality, they were going to express it some way.
Right.
And if they were not going to have babies and were not going to have families or whatever, then they must have done that within themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. And in fact, they must have all known and must have had rules, or the only thing is if the public finds out, it collapses. Because then you find that the underpinnings of the spiritual movements, once it becomes rules, where the spiritual feeling that creates itself has somewhat of a different thing. The rules aren't there as much as it is a creative life, or when you're in love with someone, staying true to them is not rule bound, but somehow comes with the feeling.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah.
And the feeling, if it was instructed, it probably wouldn't do it, but it comes naturally to care for something in yourself, a feeling for someone else in absence. Allows one, without it being so rule bound, but allows one, you see that there is, once one is touched in a certain way, there is an inner integrity that is awakened. And that inner integrity is not to take advantage. That somehow it's a shared life. When that is awakened, you perceive the shared life as the real life, not so much the individual survival. Is anyone else on here?
You have a bug. You have a bug that keeps going in front of your camera.
I see the bug. I just
It
saw
was
it.
happening Sunday also. I
We were
don't know if he's the same guy.
calling it Urja's bug. We found it's a pet.
We have, let's see, Sophia, Jimmy, and John are all on YouTube, and a couple other people who haven't said hi.
Okay, I hope this sounds, well, we again are talking about an experience that we share. And it is almost as if we were sharing, like we've made movies or we've made music together or something, we've shared that. And so you see that there is a creative dimension to the life that you're talking about. So when you're talking about earning a living, you're talking about music, or you're talking about art, or you're talking about this or that, which is not literally in the same way as earning a living, or the quid pro quo of doing to getting. So creatively, the premise creatively is that you're always broke, but not coming from poor. Now, you may see that people are creating backgrounds for themselves as part of their expression. And so they're coming from poor or abused fathers or mothers or this. So more and more of that is happening, no matter if the person was rich or poor or whatever. There is a kind of showbiz pressure now to create a literalized background. But as I said before in our own exploration, when an accident happens, so you read a letter from the past or a diary, and you see the event from a different place.
Hmm.
And like I say, you discover your mother was a woman. Now, usually they would condemn the person for that because she was supposed to be a mother first. Anything that varied with that you discovered, you was like, okay. But then the discovery of a person that you haven't met fully, but then it reflects to you a whole parallel life that was lived. While you thought you were living a historical life, you were actually living a creative life with someone, and they had to hide their existence from you for it to carry on. And their existence was no big deal, as if they were killers or robbers. No, they may have had boyfriends or girlfriends. They may have had a loneliness. They were people. But the discovery of parents as people before they were parents, people who were doing their version of parents. You don't discover where you can hurt the literal mother or hurt the literal father for not doing this or doing that. Once the perception is there, that takes away your ownership of the story, and survival isn't the element. Then you see that somehow people, they did this favor to you. They somehow got along with the other way, did this juggling act and everything like that. But somehow they hung out long enough. So you see another dimension where that was hidden from you. Not only were you hurt, but you understood how heavy it was to live with you. The thing that's missing in your analysis is I could then say, thanks, mommy, for hanging out with me. I can see what kind of ball buster I was now. In retrospect, how heavy it must have been. While you were worried about whether your husband was going to stay or go or whatever, and if the kids would stop. Okay. So then you understood the tenuous situations that you were living in that was unperceived. Not only psychologically, but you see on how many dimensions and how you have a literal sense of something, but at times an accidental memory sends you back in time and space where you don't own the story. And you see something that was hidden in plain sight, that your mother was a woman. What a schmucky, everybody in the neighborhood could tell you that. But again, you seeing that sees the whole dimension of it. You see, it's as if the difference between you have the experience. So let's say you've brought a discipline to your life where there is some spirituality in your existence. And then from that feeling, you discover a diary about your past life. And you see that diary then reveals a hidden dimension in the story. And it's the same dimension that you're seeking through meditation and through different forms. Because the meditator looking at the story wouldn't have had an identity. So their identity wouldn't have blocked them from seeing this larger picture that was unfolding in front of them. That they brought an energy to the story. And that they brought an energy throughout their existence of a kind of yearning. And it took the shape of a psychological this and a psychological that. But you also understood what was missing with the family was a good-hearted conversation, a hey baby conversation. Impossible unless someone dies, unless someone passes away in retrospect. But you can almost see the impossibility of the family meeting and say, look, Papa, you don't have to do this anymore. Right? You're not good as parents. You guys are really, you don't have to pretend to be parents anymore. You can do the shopping. You can look out for us over here. That everyone has an agreement in the family. The worst thing that you're about is acting like parents. Well, who the hell's telling you to do that? We'd like to have you as a friend. We know, okay. So then
You know, Danny, I did that because of you. I did that with my mom, and I'm the only one that had a good relationship with her when she passed.
Well, that's also what's happening. Remember, my mother came here to die. And she was supposed to die in Brooklyn, there, in that place. It was all set up there. But then she fell in love with Mary, I think, and then rerouted the thing. And then came out here. So that's an impossibility for the way we are to have your mother then come into the story from a history, and all that you shared together. But somehow we were able to create a theater. Do you remember her? Okay.
Yeah, I met her briefly.
Yeah, so somehow it became natural.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one night we thought we lost it all because somehow we found out later that a nurse came in around 3 a.m. and she must have been having bad dreams or something like that. So the nurse gave my mother this fentanyl. And then
what does fentanyl do? Is it a painkiller?
This is the strongest stuff in the street now. They say it's all over America, fentanyl. And it's being manufactured now in China, supposedly. But fentanyl was a drug that got to you like that. But then they gave her another shot 5 minutes later, the woman did.
Of fentanyl also?
To knock her out.
Ooh.
But then when she came out of it, there was 3 days that she was singing Tony Bennett songs and rolling on the bed. And then one day I told you when they called me in at 7 a.m, she was almost like a orangutan. I told you, I should have killed you when you were born. It was almost like evil, like a horror movie.
Wow.
And then even they couldn't take her to the hospital unless they found out that she didn't drink or she didn't eat for a few days. She wouldn't eat. So then they took her based on that, without her permission. But she was kicking them and fighting with them. And then in the hospital, when I saw her, they were trying to hold her, and she was calling them all kinds of names and kicking at me there. And so the first few days was really weird. And then I think Mary went one night and gave her some jello, as I told you. And then she started crying and wanted to come home, and it fell away. So whether it completely came out of the fentanyl, which now in retrospect, that probably killed her, because you see
Wow.
how many people are dying from it now. I still have some of it here, a couple of those. It was an injection inside the injection thing there.
Is it for pain? What's it for?
Fentanyl is an opiate,
Oh.
but maybe now they say that some of the fentanyl is hundreds of times stronger, and some of the stuff from China that is artificially made. They found a way to artificially make heroin and other things like that. I think that in the future, I was reading some article where they have found a form of yeast that they can make opiates out of.
Wow.
And that anyone may be able to make it in
Wow.
somewhere, So it's a strange world that's happening out there, And it's not only Bitcoins, but it's happening in probably a remarkable technology that's running away with the story, it seems. What do you say, Derek? What's happening? Have you invested in Bitcoin?
I have a little bit, not very much. I mean, I don't have a lot to invest, so bits and pieces here and there.
Well, there is as I told you, there are ATMs here. Are you familiar with those?
I mean, only by sight. I've never really used one or anything. It feels like they're trying to package a new technology into something familiar to expose the public to it, which makes sense, but largely unnecessary, I think.
Well, let's say if Mary learns something about it, there's something pure in it then for me, meaning that it's not so, it's more taking care of something, more around the energy or something, or looking out for something.
You talk about it like the paintings or the artworks, and that makes a lot of sense because they consider it property, and the value of it increases based on its rarity, and there's a limited number of supply for it, and the beauty of it is that nobody owns Bitcoin, so there's nobody profiting off of it specifically.
Well, I'm saying to all of us that we have lived in a Bitcoin world ourselves. You understand? Our life has been a creative act itself. And so somehow relationship has its own form of Bitcoin, of a shared experience. So then to me, the artwork is shared experiences that I've had. And it was a different way. It was a way of how to then have a spirituality and business. And so you see the motives of business had a competitive element in it, and the competitive element was not a creative spiritual expression. It was more cooperative. So you see that more and more the people who then did the expressions of business here had a good heart, and they cared for people. So the people who worked there were not workers, they were friends who they were caring for and sharing. So it was naive as a business. Because it didn't have the hard-headedness of profit margin, because it was more of a shared life. So you're overpaying people. You were doing this, you were finding different ways. Okay. But for 40 years or so, you see that it's not been literally a business, but it has been this, it's transformed a few 100 times and different situations and different expressions, but it has still been a labor of love. So then you go when you saw Bitcoin was more like a parallel thing to what you were doing anyway. but
Mhm.
it transferred over then to the computer and to an online logic. That if you were not born into it or exposed to it from the beginning or whatever, then you still had to learn things to enter into it. Whereas kids picked it up immediately by just being in it.
Mm,
It was second grade to them, but it was Harvard University for you to find out how the hell the damn thing worked. You understand all the stuff that you had to do depending on where you were coming from. So generally, we have utilized the computer expression for the things that we're interested in. But we haven't thrown ourselves into such an experience where we're immersed in it.
mhm.
Hmm? Okay. So, but there is something in immersion that gives you instant understanding of something, where people who are really deeply uneducated can explain Bitcoin in a way that's still hard to comprehend because it's so nuanced where they're from. So I think that reading that magazine article in the New Yorker magazine on Bitcoin,
Mhm.
that guy, that real scammer guy, that Indian guy who's made trillions or something. But that article in the New Yorker can be found. I found it here by just asking for it there. But that guy, if you read the whole article, it gives you a real running sense of a weird world out there that they're remaking.
And he was specifically talking about SPACs, SPACs, more than cryptocurrency. Although I'm sure if you look at his MO, that's probably what he's doing, on a regular basis. But the SPACs seem to be a very foolhardy investment. Looking at it that way, investing into a business is not really a business, and it's only the promise of one. And
Well, that's what, but in other words, they're breaking through the bullshit of the business ethic and showing that regular guys are just stepping into a thing and all of a sudden becoming billionaires. Well, it looks like an accidental move. And an accidental move can also destroy it in a minute. And they were kind of explaining how Musk can be destroyed in a minute at the same time. Like everything can collapse around a rumor or a circumstance. Or 8 cars crashing, maybe, okay. But they also say that Afghanistan can bring down Biden. But then Biden says, no, we should be proud of what we did in Afghanistan and what we carried out at the airport. And so then you see how they're playing, they're all playing it differently. Because they have an underlying motive. And so if you're not there with the motive, then you also see that a lot of these situations have an underlying motive of continuity. So they're making up stories, circumstance, investment stories, or whatever. What made you go into the investment then, Derek?
well, I had worked with a company called Hacker Noon, and I had learned about Bitcoin from back then, and it was just really very beginning of it, basically. But I bought into the ideology of this idea that you can set aside the centralized authority around banks and money and just have a straight peer-to-peer interaction across this monetary network. The idea of that was charming to me. So I bought maybe like $10 worth at the time. And then I didn't start really getting more into it until this year. And Joan actually had pushed in that direction. So
yeah. And so now Mary, even though now she got up this morning to do this thing, apparently the bank couldn't do it. They have to find another bank to do it or whatever, but she kind of is hip to how to do it and what's going on in one sense. So I think we'll do this thing with Spiro a little bit investigative if others are. And if you also wanted to jump into that or have some perspective, we'll see where we are, then
happy to do that.
what do you think? And Kai also. And it may not be, we may have a mutual thing happening. I don't know how it works, but I'm kind of giving my blessing to a kind of thing with Spiro, you know what I mean? Because he kind of represents one who's kind of emerging in that story, and yet he still has a kind of integrity of form as friendship between us, where he can't really hustle or like most of these guys, you have to become really strong, don't you? And you want to make a big buck.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories out there like that, leverages and all that. It just seems more, if you pay attention to how the market's flowing, then you can buy when it's low, that kind of thing, and then really don't sell. I mean, like a Bitcoin is a property that is supposed to really gain in value over the next 10 years. That
It used to be called, in the creative life, you had a stash.
yeah.
So the stash was your Bitcoin. Now, whether you had a stash, you had a month's rent hidden for next month or something like that. So there was a stash in your way of thinking. How much you had in your account versus how much you owed, this and that. So that's your stash. But then sometimes you collected things, or you had things, or you had jewelry, or you had ownership, that if something happened to you, you had a stash. And so the stash allows you. So then I say, okay, what would, if I die and you look at the artwork, I think it'll pay off the house and give you 2 years with the bills and everything like that.
Mhm.
So then they say, well, what kind of way of thinking is that? I say, well, you know what way of thinking that is. If you see how much you got saved or this or that, you can figure how many months you got, or 3 months or a year, or if the house falls away, do you have a way of recovering? Or, okay. So basically, it is a creative thing that is happening anyway. Now it gets caught up in fear and dynamics, but the fear and dynamics is knowing that the rent is due in an hour or something like that. So it's not exactly fear. It is, in fact, a way of keeping your calendar of events balanced. So you see that you have a hidden motive in what you're doing, if this is happening or whatever. So let's say we are in that already. And that money is an aspect of it that's not only literal money, but it's evocative money in terms of next month's rent. Well, will I do this? Do I have to pay the dentist or this or that? Is that happening? So then basically you see that the abstraction has become your reality. So then we think, even though I'm worried about next month's rent and this and that, the perception that this movie that you're in has become your literal reality, where you have to then work to get the rent, and so it literalizes. But in looking at it, it's a creative act that's happening. You're able to measure next month and next year what you're going to need and how much doing is necessary now. So you're doing it anyway, and as you recognize it, it changes. So then I say, as I look at it, as I'm hearing it and looking at it over, I then suggest, what about Bitcoin? But I say, I also am not throwing myself into it, literally. I don't. Okay. But am I also seeing some dimensions within our creative expression, our life? And so then you see that a lot of it is becoming a big hustle. But then you also see the dynamic that I like, where it seems like accidentally a person's life changes. All of a sudden they go from a regular guy, or one guy says that he invested $400 and now he earned 2.1 million out of it up there. But it also may go down to 100,000 at 2 million overnight, or if something happens, or if people just, if there's a scandal or something like that, they may all pull their stuff out of it. Okay. And then they're broke all of a sudden. Someone who was worth $1 billion is broke all of a sudden. So it's an interesting world. I've existed in an interesting world for the last 50 some odd years, where in leaving the literal world of my past, the world has then become this creative act over dumb things, this India, that experience, doctor, what we shared, our life. But then almost everything in retrospect no longer came out of the history, but came more out of the mystery of sudden meetings in India and love affairs, and then taking a chance and creating something, and things that you would never have done in the prior life were normal when it came out of our experience. And that coming out of our experience, everyone brought a kind of inherent philosophy into their expression. And yet it was natural for us as driving across country, living here, communities. It was natural for us that we didn't have jobs or work that way, but work meant taking care of the land that you were in or the situation, or where it was natural to your day work. It was not a job per se. And somehow we've experienced over time an inherent income that's part of the flow. That didn't literalize in anyone's stash of being a billionaire or a millionaire or this or that. In fact, the literalization was not good at that time, that you owned money, this or that, but that it was flowing. And so therefore it was creative. It allowed you to live. And I say, why? And because there are moments then where you see that that becomes automatic or natural, that then there is a, hey, baby conversation. Do you want to do this anymore? So from my reading of the Bitcoin, I still don't see it clearly, but it is, I'm looking at it from our creative perspective, something that allows us to be. Something that allows us to be where our existence is our work. Where in fact it is not avoidance of this world or that world, where they made that world natural. So then if you don't do it that way, you're unnatural. And I say, no, if you don't do it that way, it may be evidence that you're more human, that you can't be incorporated into a strand so easily. So then I say, okay, well, I'll take the loss with Spiro than the gain with the corrupt situation. You know, so it's not really necessary. But if we're going in, and I think that your son would probably be the perfect genius, maybe even Spiro could hook up in some way, but that he would have instinctively keeping a moral center in what he's doing. And
Yes, definitely.
yeah. So let's see.
I think he'd have fun with it, actually, if I just give him some money to play with.
Yeah. And if they get a crazy idea, a couple of them, let's say Seth and Spiro, and what's your boy's name again?
Tico.
See, that's right. So to Tico, say the three of them open up a corporation. Holy shit.
Great. Tico's all ready to open a company. That's his goal.
Okay, so let's say we'll try holy shit. Let's say if the idea is good enough, I'll give you all the paintings and everything. You can have them in the. But let's say, let's see how it unfolds. Is that okay, Derek?
Seems like that's what we're doing.
But you're saying that Joan is pretty hip to everything now.
Yeah, yeah. She's been in it for a year longer, I think, than I have. So.
Oh, say Mary.
Yeah.
You can have a conversation with Joan maybe too about
About Bitcoin?
Did you put the money in today?
Not yet. I'm going to when it was too hectic.
Okay, so maybe
This afternoon.
you can have the female version of it and then
Yeah.
keep Kai posted also.
Okay.
And then and see if we want to get in deeper than
Lovely.
the first movement, you know. But you say you can do it on your own also.
Yeah.
So if Kai called you and said, well, what moves?
Yeah,
You can
I
tell
set
her
up
what
the-
you're doing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I work with somebody who, he's a financial writer and he has a lot of money invested too. So I can check in with him as well.
Have you heard any further from the, what's the fellow's name who's?
Wayne, no, I have not.
Not at all. Well, I hope he's okay. Maybe he took up Dr. Joe.
I will check in with him this week. I will make a point to do that.
Maybe he took in Dr. Joe. That's quite okay, because then, as I say, we've had two folks that just passed away, the two Johns, and there's still a few situations up in the air, health-wise, you know. But well, Marty is the big one. They found a little bit. They think a little cancer on the bone,
Mm.
the spine or something. So it keeps on shifting. But at the same time, it's also around the love affairs that they're in at the same time. So it's a very weird thing to have a major sickness and to have a major love affair shifting or not happening. When they're, you see it came to a kind of care.
Mhm.
And you say, holy shit, how impossible it would be. But you see that the next phase of the relationship is a kind of care that is not only literal caring, but is also a kind of surrender. I say this exploration of I and thou, when the feelings take away the differences. And it's like looking in a show on the news and you see babies killed or something like that, where you almost cry. And you see that somehow seeing something takes away the difference between you and them.
Yeah.
And you see when you recognize the frailty of it, you see why strongly the first phase of the life is a strong commitment to protecting an innocence in the being.
Yeah.
But the next phase of the life is that the innocence expresses itself as its own reality.
Mm.
So that's the same if you can understand where you're caring for that in the child. But then there's a phase where they're free then to express that experience.
Yes.
And so you see that that is also what's happening in the life, that there is an experience that in retrospect you see to be sacred. But while it was happening, it was normal. So somehow you see a thread running through the story where you don't need too many feel-good philosophies, because you see the thread running through the story to some degree. So let's see where this takes us, okay? This Bitcoin question that just came to us.
Yeah, I'm happy now. I finally feel inspired to actually do it.
I don't see myself as doing. I think that the folks I'm related to will do the doing. You can leave them in Spiro's hands, and now, especially if Mary picks up on how to navigate through that world, then
Yeah.
Mary would be a nice force to relate that to. In fact, many businesses, many stores are now taking Bitcoin. More and more, they say, and some banks are also. Is that true, Derek?
Yeah, they've probably been accumulating for the past few years.
So Spirit could take Bitcoin, right?
I don't know. They may. One store said that they're going to try to find a way to do Bitcoins here in town, or they're not. They're calling it cryptocurrency. You know, and it's because they didn't want to take credit cards where they had to pay 5% of the transaction, so
Right.
the bank immediately. You know, so they were feeling that that was a killer to them, to their business, the 5%, especially at this point, on top of the taxes and everything else. So then they were thinking of cryptocurrency, and I think that's sure. If that, we may even discover so many people that are doing that already.
Yeah. I would think Santa Fe would be a good town for that.
Yeah, no, I'm sure down the road that they're doing it already, and that we're the ones that are naive. But I think we're naive because somehow it has to be pure in some way. It can't always be that you're taking advantage of someone as part of your survival.
No.
So we're not conceiving business as a kind of competitive structure with those around you or whatever, but it's doing our thing in some weird way.
Mm-hmm.
And a kind of weird style of life where we grow our own plums and and apples and cabbage out there and pot and whatever. So it's normal.
Plums, cabbage, and pot.
Yeah, it's weird. And it's normal. What do you think? If you took walk around the back, you would see it as normal. And then segues conspiracy theories about everything that's happened and what's going on out there or whatever. Okay. It's pretty brilliant. it's remarkable how much he retains of news articles and this and that. So it's pretty brilliant. I think he's doing my version of the experience in some way. So it seems normal. And yet it is obviously a creation. And it seems normal to have Bitcoin conversations now, and then who's down the road, and you say, oh, you're finding out about Bitcoin. We've been doing that all along,
Yes.
and this and that. But when I'm finding out about it, I think it's coming from a bit of a different place than this or that. It is around the sadhana or the journey. And that somehow I would look for ways where there's integrity in the journey somehow, where you don't have to be a sneak in the world or could be a conspiracy. That survival is not this animal expression. Sometimes it may be, but survival is reduced to one of the creative expressions in life, not the dominant form. And so then you see inherently there may be surrender in that perspective. And surrender meaning that for the greater good, you may surrender something. That you see your relationship then is to a thou. So the elements that you would have had for the I alone, the survival dimensions that would happen with the I, when it becomes a thou, it's a shared life. You think from the grace for both of you or for those you're sharing with. And if the thou is a larger perspective that you're sharing with folks, then why you may do something is more coming out of the common good than it is out of the literal situation.
Yeah.
So Mary,
Yes.
so you may connect around this Bitcoin stuff as you learn more.
We could have ladies club.
Huh?
Yeah.
You could have a ladies club?
No, I'm kidding. But yeah, with Kai and
Yes, kind of now. Look,
John.
That sounds fun, Mary. Let's have a ladies club.
you want to do a Bitcoin partnership with
Yes.
Kai? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll do a partnership with you
That was
and you'll have her boy representing everything.
Tico.
Chico, okay.
Love it.
Okay.
Tika just made it into the premier performance group at his music school. He had an audition last week and he got it.
Wow.
I'm proud of him.
So
That's
cool.
great. Oh, that's good.
That's lovely.
That's good.
Wow.
And we may have Joan and Derek as San Francisco representatives.
Yeah.
He says that Joan has been doing this for more than.
Hi, Joan.
Hi guys.
Hey, Joan.
Hi,
Hi,
there's
Mary.
Joan. So Joan is going to be the new
Our West Coast Bitcoin.
cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Crypto guru.
You'll have to support. Now we're going to. Mary's buying some today with Spiro.
Oh,
And
nice.
what was the names?
Well, Ethereum, and we're going to do a little bit with Bitcoin, and then that Canaba or
Cardano.
Cardano. Yeah.
Cardano.
We're going to just do a little bit in all three.
Yeah, do a little bit. It's a little bit pumped up right now, so there'll probably be a mini crash.
Or yeah, like an inhale. The market looks like it inhales and exhales, and it's on an exhale at the moment.
Okay. So it's
Okay.
better to buy it maybe when it's a little low.
When it dips a little bit. I mean, the thing is, it's unpredictable too, because it could skyrocket pretty
Yeah.
good. So
There might be dips this month, but October, November, it's gonna. That's
Okay.
what happened last year. So usually, like the pattern kind of stays the same.
So get it this month.
I'll call
Maybe
you.
Bitcoin's a little
Joan-
bit dip, right.
Joan, you may connect them with Tico, Mary,
Kai. Yeah.
Spiro,
We have a crypto
Hi.
club.
We'll have a
and
conference.
what do you think? Since you have,
Yeah.
so you may be the San Francisco branch of the expression or something like that.
Yeah, East Coast, West Coast.
You may be the Pennsylvania expression or whatever. So we may just create something goofy. What do you think, John?
I think it's.
So Mary's
yeah.
going to invest today. Spiro's been the one who's doing this and doing that. But all his friends are heavy hitters in that market.
Spiro? Spiro's friend?
They're too heavy with, there's some, have you heard of Ripple then?
Yeah, I invested in it and then I dumped it because they were
Yeah.
going through lawsuits and
Yeah, well, the lawsuits were basically their way of thinking,
yeah.
you know, so then, Alfred told me he had a lot in Ripple.
Oh,
But then Spiro said, you know, we kind of are doing a hipper thing in Ripple. You don't want to do Ripple. It's
yeah. There-
okay.
There's a lot of shady
It's
things.
Chinese owned also, so it's coming from a kind of strict rules kind of situation. So we'll see, but let's see how this goofy thing works out then. That it's
Yeah.
introduced.
Yeah.
We'll try that today, and we'll have some conversation. And what do you think? Tico may be a genius. But other than that, without too much greediness, let's see it more as that we're making a movie together. And they say, okay, we'll make this movie together creatively in a goofy way. And you're raising enough funds to make the film. And what is the film? Is kind of allows you to be free, where you don't have to, we don't have a billion or this and that. You have enough so you don't have to sell yourself out
Yes.
so much out there, and you're managing the circumstance. So I'm just saying that it's just part of attempting to live a creative life, you know, where you have a running sense of your value or you have a running sense of the situation. So as I say, I can walk around the room and see all the art collected over 30 years and have a running sense of its values. But then translating it into the market is another scene. So what I've done usually is trade. If we needed to get a car, then I would trade a painting for the car. Now even maybe take a loss. In their words, they may be happy to get it. But to me, the loss didn't matter too much if we got it because it filled something that we needed. So I've been dealing in something like that anyway, where people have a relative value around something that may be shifting overnight. It may be worth 10 times more overnight if some accident happens, or it may lose its value. Okay. So we're in that, but I'm not exactly getting online where somehow the chain, the blockchain, you got that, Kai? You understand the blockchain aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the whole basis of it, really, is that's what people are excited about, is the blockchain, it seems.
And that no one owns it.
Mhm.
And that it's always there or something like that. So these are concepts that are very interesting, that once you pick up on it and it's knowledgeable, you understand it. But it must have been years that they try to sell the American Indians. And this picture of Andrew Jackson on this bill means that, and they say, are you kidding me? The American Indian, get lost with that. And you were trying to explain something that seemed normal to you. The dollar bill is such an abstraction that you see that you've already been living in a kind of Bitcoin atmosphere where we accepted banks as being our reality, and we accepted interest and this and that and taxes and all of that. So the normalcy of it made it into a reality. But from a person coming from an entirely different place, it's a very weird America.
Mm.
Okay. But because you see then it's how it's organized. So you see then the Bitcoin movement is an attempt to get around the organized behavior. And it starts to show you that the organized behavior is in fact an illusion of power.
Yeah.
That it's an illusion of power, and that you're left then in the world dealing with the effects of what these guys are deciding. So they decide it's time for you to send your kid to war.
Mm.
And you see, in what room did you decide that my kid should go? Well, they said, not only your kid, but the whole neighborhood, we're going to send off to war because we have to stop this. And they say, holy man, wait a second. We're in the world, but we're not of it. Okay. So you start to see then, but the technical aspect of it is coming from computer knowledge, isn't it? An easy movement with computer work.
Yeah.
Where for most of us, or some of us old geezers, computer work is still a challenge over what you would just push a button over. So if Seth comes over, something that may baffle us for 5 years, he just pushed a button.
Right.
And And they say, why didn't you just push that button? It was right there. And it was saying maybe you didn't see that button for some reason. So then you kind of understand, for you to know that button that he knew instinctively, you would have to go to school to learn it.
Mm.
And going to school to learn about the computer is as bad as getting an operation now for cancer. It's a drag,
Mm.
especially when people around you know it like that. Okay. So Tico may look at us as all old geezers.
Yes. He willingly helps out though.
He says, all you had to do was push that button. Okay, Derek?
Mhm.
So should we go into this venture? Well, I'll watch it unfold now that Mary has taken up some of it. And I think that what she's buying today will be a birthday present when Rafi comes down next week.
You know, I would think you would be interested, Danny, specifically in the NFT marketplaces where the artwork that they put out there is interesting and coming from a creative place.
And OpenSea and Rarible.
Yeah.
I can send you some links if you're interested in taking a look.
Okay, maybe we'll, I'm gonna do an evasive thing, maybe send it to Mary.
Okay, I will do that.
But what about you? Are you gonna jump in yourself, Kai, or you'll let Tico do the talk?
Yes, I will. I just need somebody to direct me and guide me what direction and how much and all that stuff. Then I'll just do it. I don't want to have to figure it out. I don't want to have to look at the market and try and figure all that out. I don't understand how that works.
Okay, so maybe you, Mary, and Joan will just touch base every now and then. What do you think?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Mhm. Because you're in a similar space then, it seems. And that Joan just jumped in and says, well, you know, for this year, and that's what she was able to explain this all happening in 1 minute. You know what I mean? That we would say, what the hell is she talking about? Okay. So I'm glad that you all share a common language about something that you're seeing. My feeling is that from the sense of outward looking in, it may be a nice expression for us to allow us to live the way we're living.
Mm.
You know, and so creatively that way, I feel that it's where it can be high, it can be low, but it's also this mystery that's happening. So the literalization of the mystery is I'll find a way to get somehow some expression from Mary into the situation. But once it's in there, it's kind of your creation. That'll be, is that okay, Mary?
Yeah, that's so sweet.
So it seems pretty nice then.
Maybe we can set up a Zoom call. I'll send emails and maybe we can set up a Zoom call.
Yeah.
When everybody has time.
So, and Kai says maybe you'll set up a Zoom call between you. Okay, or you may even at times use the, after the conversation that we share, then you may have a carry-on between you. Or something, so we'll figure that out. But let's see what happens today if that investment goes through. Okay, everyone, I'll see you later.
Thank you, Danny.
Take care,
Thanks, Danny.
everyone. Hope I'll see you tomorrow night or Friday or Sunday, is it? No, Thursday or Sunday. Nice seeing you, John. You're okay?
Yeah.
You having a good time?
Yeah.
And it has been an amazingly remarkable situation with the passing of John and the experience. Yeah. Okay. It's the mystery and the history. And it's funny, our hanging out becomes a mystery to the family. Because it's not organized around the history of the situation in the family. But the friendship has experiences that's more like a theater. Or more like a movie we've shared. It has the creative dynamic is the strongest. Holy shit. But you've just been through Joan and Derek and boy, are you okay, everyone?
All is
And
well.
somehow the story of all these years that you've just experienced out there is just in one instant just come into a kind of grace. Okay, we'll see you soon.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Danny.
Take care.
Bye.